Hello there, it's Andy Parks from the Washington Times, and I'll be joined momentarily by Jeff Mordock, Washington Times White House reporter. But first, as a listener to my podcast, you qualify to receive a 50% discount on an annual digital subscription to the Washington Times simply by going to washingtontimes.com/Andy. That's washingtontimes.com/ANDY. Now let's bring them on. Washington Times White House reporter Jeff Mordock. Hi, Jeff.
Hey, Andy. How are you today?
Doing just fine. Biden says he has confidence in Federal Reserve Chairman amid Elizabeth Warren criticism. Now, we're talking about Jerome Powell. Besides being the choice of former President Donald Trump, what's the problem Warren and the other Democrats have with him?
Well, under his watch, there's a lot of alleged insider trading and securities sales that sort of took advantage of which stocks were benefiting from the pandemic. Democrats are very angry that this happened under his watch. It's still under investigation, so we don't know all of the details yet, but because he's a Trump appointee, they're clearly pointing the finger at him. Senator Warren accused him of running a culture of corruption at the Federal Reserve. It'll be interesting to see because Biden needs to make a decision very soon on whether he wants to reappoint Powell. Biden in the past, before this sort of came out, had suggested that he would because he has received a lot of bipartisan support. And it's an easy confirmation that the Republicans would be on board with. When President Trump nominated him, I think he was confirmed by something like 84-13. So he's an easy confirmation, and it would spare the president another fight with Congress. And as you know, and as we'll talk about, he's got a lot of fights with Congress right now. I don't think he's gunning for another one.
Yeah. You know, Powell's term runs out in, about 4 months? Why not just let him finish and be on his way?
Well, that's a possibility, but to do that, he's got to send the nomination to Congress. He's got to get it through Congress. He's got to have somebody ready to go when Powell's term expires in February. So all of that needs to be done now. I know February of 2022 seems like a long way off, but it really isn't. And, decisions need to start being made now to get somebody in position if he decides not to renominate Powell.
All right, I'm going to move on to Biden says spending plan is necessary to compete with China. Biden tried to go to friendly territory to make his points, a union training facility in Michigan, right?
That's correct. And if you look at when Biden goes on the road, when he has his road show to sell his spending plan and his infrastructure plan, the majority of them are at union facilities. He's going there because they are friendly territory. They support him. He's the most union-friendly president we've probably had, at least in recent U.S. history. And it's a good arena for him to go and sell because they're already buying what he's selling. It's interesting, though, he's doing a road show this week where he went to Michigan yesterday and he went to Chicago the day before. He went to a district Trump won in 2020. Trump won pretty handily. Trump won in 2016. They're represented by a centrist Democrat who narrowly won election. I think it was something like 48-49%, who has sort of been wishy-washy on the president's massive economic agenda. And it's really an interesting way that he's going there and trying to make the case and reach out to centrists and try to get them on board. But the Chicago trip on Thursday I find really interesting because he's beloved in Chicago. He's already got support in Chicago. I'm not sure who he's going to Chicago to make this case to because everybody he can speak to in Chicago, including the congressional representatives, are already on board with him.
All right, so he wants to compete with China. Compete how, though? Militarily? Education-wise?
Education. He's pointing out the spending that China invests in education, and he's making the argument that on several industries where the U.S. used to be the leader, China is now ahead of us. A great example of that is steel. We make in a year the same amount of steel China makes in a month. And he's arguing that that with his plan, we can invest in these jobs and create jobs and start to move forward in terms of getting people prepared for jobs in the new economy. He's making the argument, and this is one of the reasons why he went to Michigan, is the union he had, they do work on cars, and he's trying to make the argument that the investment in education will prepare the next generation of auto workers to make electric vehicles.
What was the Republican response to his speech?
Well, the Republicans say that he's misleading the public about his economic plan, that it will cause debt, it will cause economic chaos because it's just the spending is just so high. I mean, right now, as it stands, we're looking at a $4.7 trillion with a T economic package, which is one of the largest economic proposals we've ever had by a president. I mean, it probably is the largest.
Two people, Democrats facing reality of cutting Biden's social welfare bill. Odd for the Democrats to break ranks, but Biden's bill, as it sits, it's in big trouble.
It is in big trouble, and I think what's going to have to happen and where they are is it's going to have to come down, and it's going to have to come down a lot. We see Senator Manchin. He's been drawing a line in the sand. He doesn't want to go beyond $1 trillion, roughly $1 trillion. There's a new date to vote on this, which is October 31st, I believe, October 31st. So that creates some time for them to sort of hash out an agreement and try to get this through. But yes, they're going to have to cut a lot of programs. And then that raises a couple of issues. One, which programs do you cut? Because everybody has a pet program. And then two, if you're going to go this big, you have to fully fund it. You can't go this big and partially fund some things or have things slated that the funding runs out, because then by the time 2024 runs around, people will start to notice that these programs didn't go as far, as wide in scope as the president pitched, and that could hurt him on the campaign trail. So it'll be really interesting to see where they decide to cut and what they do to try to get this down to a more manageable number.
Does Biden have a low number, period?
My guess is I think he'd be willing to go down to $2 trillion, but they keep saying that they don't want to negotiate with the press, so they're not really saying what his low number would be. But I think he'd be willing to cut at least $2 trillion out of it, because I think it's the only way he's going to get this through Congress.
Yeah. Part of the process, Biden plays down bathroom and videotaping of female senator. He says it's part of politics, but come on, a camera crew going in the bathroom to bother a sitting senator?
Yes, it surprised a lot of people how much he soft-pedaled activists following Kyrsten Sinema into the bathroom in Arizona to protest her opposition to his $3.5 trillion social safety net bill. He just said it was part of the process. He condemned it. But what's interesting is about a half hour later, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki had to come out, and she had to give a more forceful condemnation and sort of clean up a little bit of what he said, because he really downplayed it and did not give that the condemnation those kind of actions deserve.
I can't help but wonder what his reaction would have been if Nancy Pelosi had been in the stall.
Exactly, yes. Or a Republican for that matter.
Yeah, true.
You know?
Yeah.
It's interesting because his administration, they're going after parents who harass teachers over COVID protocols in critical race theory, but they're kind of just leaving these protesters. They're not even really condemning these protesters who followed Sinema into the bathroom. It's a really interesting contrast there.
Russian roulette. Biden rips Republicans for filibuster threats on debt limit increase. He actually accused Republicans in the Senate of possibly ruining the economy. A lot of people would say that it's already well on its way.
Well, that's the thing. That's the issue. Is he's saying that we need to raise the debt ceiling because it's going to create economic ruin. And the Republicans are saying, well, no, it's, as we talked about, your spending bills are going to create economic ruin. And it's quite the standoff because he's trying to create room for more spending, and more spending is how we got into this mess where we need to extend the debt ceiling in the first place.
Yeah.
So it's a little confusing there, because how's he going to justify all of this spending, which is just going to continually to weaken the dollar?
All right, before I let you run, what are you working on?
Well, speaking of that, President Biden is going to have a bunch of business leaders, including some leaders from the top banks at the White House, to talk about why not raising the debt ceiling will harm their businesses and the impact it will have on business as he continues to really put pressure on Republicans to get them to raise the debt ceiling.
Gotcha. Read all of Jeff Mordock's stories at WashingtonTimes.com. Jeff, as always, thank you much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Andy. You have a good week.
Washington Times White House reporter Jeff Mordock. Thanks for joining me today, and remember to receive a 50% discount on an annual digital subscription to the Washington Times. Go to WashingtonTimes.com/Andy. You'll get 24/7 digital access to the Washington Times at 50% off. Again, go to WashingtonTimes.com/ANDY. I'm Andy Parks. Have a great day.